Thank you for tuning in to our 10th lesson on the book of Galatians, Paul's letter to the Jewish and Gentile believers in that province of Galatia. Today's lesson is titled Freedom in Christ and is found in the 5th chapter, verses 1 through 15. Now, in this section, you got to know up front here that Paul talks an awful lot about circumcision here, a topic that can be an uncomfortable one, more for some than others. But the reason that he focuses on circumcision, again in this letter, is because he's bringing us back to that council that took place in Acts chapter 15 that the people he's writing to are so familiar with. That was a council that had to come together for the new Christians because a group of Judaizers, Jewish believers in Christ, were making the claim that the ceremonial laws, namely circumcision, was still a requirement for salvation. In Acts 15:1, we read, "Unless you are circumcised according to the custom taught by Moses, you cannot be saved." Now, they lost on that issue at this council, but they're pushing it again right here in these Galatian churches because they had infiltrated them the moment that Paul left. So what Paul does here is take this hottest of issues and deals with it. He says, look, this is not about the act of circumcision being right or wrong. It's neither. Unless you're making it an issue of being right or wrong and connecting it to salvation, then you're wrong, because Christ did it all. In fact, Paul goes on to say this. He says that if you think that any of your works to God save you, you got a problem. It's like you're going to God and saying, hey, God, look at me. Look at all I've done. And if you do that and expect something from God, some type of reward, some type of blessing, salvation itself, what Paul says in this section is you are dethroning Christ. You are literally taking him off that cross and you're saying, you know what you did, Jesus, wasn't enough anyway. Or you're going to God and saying, look at what I've done, as if he owes you. It's not a good idea. He doesn't owe you or me anything. I mean, what more could we want from him? He did it all. You know, this hit me hard this week because I was doing a Bible study with a group of people, and I asked the group the question, what do you think about the second coming of Jesus Christ? And one person in that group said, well, I'm not really afraid. I just hope he picks me. When he comes back to go to heaven with him, I hope I've been good enough. Now, this person said this in all humility. I mean, just from the depths of her soul, so humble. And yet, the exact opposite is true. Because that's the irony. Though it's said in humility, it's really a statement of profound arrogance. I mean, what Paul is saying here is, look, he's saying, how dare you put your works, no matter what they are, at the same level of the work of Jesus Christ on that cross. And that, my friends, is what we do every time we think that there's something we have to do or can do for our salvation. I really love how Paul masterfully handles this topic of circumcision here in this section, especially in verse 12, when he says this. He says, I wish these agitators would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. What he's really saying is this. He's saying, look, you keep trying to outdo me, to steal away these people, these Galatians, to make them your own. And that's fine. If that's what you want to try and do, to keep outdoing me so you can have them. So, since you're lying about me anyway and telling them I'm still preaching circumcision as a requirement for salvation, which I'm not, why don't you try and outdo me on this subject too? Here's an idea. Now, important to note here in this section is what Paul does beginning in verse 13. He makes a shift. He shifts from saying our obedience is not required for salvation to saying, but because you know you do have salvation in Jesus Christ, be obedient. Be obedient to God. How? Love. Love God. Serve people. Had the opportunity this past week to sit at the feet of a professor from one of our seminaries. He said this. He says, the law's purpose is to lead us to the gospel, to the cross of Jesus Christ. But the gospel's purpose is then to restore us, to put us back to doing the law so that we can do it well. Because doing God's law, doing God's will in our lives is the righteous, the right thing to do. And the greatest way we can do and keep God's laws is by serving people, seeing the need and meeting the needs of others. Pastor Alberto in Costa Rica says the very same thing, only he says it this way. He says, If I have no food on my table, I have a material problem. But if my neighbor has no food on their table, if you have no food on your table, then it's a spiritual problem. Have fun with this as you walk through this text together. It's a good one. Take care of each other. Listen to each other. Pray for each other. Love each other. Serve each other. And God bless you as you do so.